There's a place He comes to me. Though I'm blind, He helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see Him face to face.
This is Kurt Kaikkonen, pastor of Calvary Chapel, Waterford, at your neighborhood church. Today on Face to Face, we'll be in the book of Genesis. So grab your Bibles and let's get started. If you want to hear this complete message in its entirety, go to yourneighborhoodchurch.com, where you can download Your Neighborhood Church app at the App Store. There weren't any kids on the boat. It was just 8 adults. And if you really think about it, those wives, those boys' wives, Noah's 3 sons, they lost their whole family. But then again, everybody lost everything they knew. All they had was themselves. And so it had to have been kind of bittersweet. So it was saying goodbye to everything you knew, everything in the past, but also being grateful for being saved. And though probably a little apprehensive, they're probably also still a little bit excited about this new world that they're going to start. And that's exactly how it is when you come to Christ. You say goodbye to this old world that you'd lived in, but you're still a little bit excited about what God's going to do because God has given you some promises. And it's been a whole year that they're cooped up. And I know if it was my family, we would have all had to have our own places on the ark to get away from each other, at least for some of the time. Because these guys, they were just people. They were just people. They were like us. They had fights. They had envy. They'd be like, well, I cleaned up after the elephants last week. It's not my turn. We have hard enough time. We only have one dog. So I can't really imagine this. But I'm sure there was a lot of grace because I'm sure the Lord, He had His presence there. And because the whole thing is that, and this is the one thing you need to get, that God, He is obsessed with us. He loves us. He loves man. And He's willing to go through all these great lengths just to save man. God didn't destroy man. Man destroyed man. In John 3:17, even Jesus says, I did not come to condemn the world, but that the world through Him might be saved. And that's what God does. He saves us. Even through this flood, God, He saw us, and He still sees us, and He's willing to save us. And that's what He wants to do. But we have to come through that door that He's left open to the whole world. And now that door is Jesus, and it's God's Son. And it seems strange that Jesus actually did say, He says, I am the door. No one comes to the Father except through me. And just like that door was open for that whole pre-flood world to enter the ark, this door is open. This door through Jesus is left open through us. And not many people came back then, only 8 people. And not many people are rushing to come now. But I'll bet that those 8 people, they never regretted it. And I don't know anybody who's actually really come to Jesus who's ever regretted it either. They only usually wish they came sooner. And it's not only that God is trying to save us for the next world. God's trying to save us for this world too. So if God talks to your heart, you got to come. You got to have faith. You need to have an action. You just can't believe it. You have to do something. And that's about everything in our walks with the Lord. When He shows us something, we got to do something. All right. So if you want to come, if you want to pray about anything, if you want to know the Lord or anything like that, you need to get right. You need to do anything. You want to take a new job. You need to go somewhere. You need to pray. We're here to pray with you. So, well, let's pray now, and we'll let JD come and get us out of here. So here we have it. The new world, it starts again. And now Noah, he's like the second Adam. And for the second time, God tells Noah to go be fruitful and multiply. And the dominion that had been given to Adam and Eve over the animals, well, that's now gone. And from now on, animals are going to have to fear man, and they should, because now animals have become a part of man's diet in this new world. And God only had given Noah only one stipulation about eating meat, and that's to drain the blood and not to eat the blood with the meat. Now, this stipulation that he gives here, this comes up again in the New Testament in the early church. Because if you remember that the early church was primarily all Jewish, and when it was revealed to the early church, to these Jewish men, that the Gentile races, that all people from all races, that they could be saved, they didn't expect Gentiles to have to become Jews and to follow all the dietary laws that the Jews had. But they did expect them to obey this covenant given to all the nations, to all the races through Noah. And this was part of that covenant, not to eat blood of animals, but they were free to eat any animals. So for the Gentiles, they can eat all the animals. They weren't restricted to eat only the animals that the Jews could eat. And then after this, and after he tells them that you can't eat the blood because the life is in the blood and life comes from God, he makes a difference between man and animals. And he says, if anybody kills a man, and he's talking about if the animals kill a man or another man kills a man, he says that they're going to be killed by a man. And so this is the beginning of capital punishment. And he tells us it's because man, he's made in the image of God. And so us as people, as men, and men means men and women, that we're higher than the animals. And back here at this time, there was no government. There was no nations. This is just a small family. And it was the family's responsibility to carry out this command. And we see that later in the structure of the Jewish nation, that they come up with this called the Avenger of Blood. And they also came up with these things called cities of refuge, just in case of an accidental death, because God makes a difference between murder and killing. And so this whole new covenant that we're talking about, it's called the Noahic covenant. And this, we're told, it extends to all of Noah's descendants, and it also extends to all the living creatures. And God, 3 times he says, he'll never destroy the earth by flood. And if he hadn't told them this, they would have been terrified every time it rained. And we've had floods since then, but none of them of this type of magnitude that destroyed the world. And we see that God also includes the animals in this covenant. And that shows us that God really does care for animals quite a bit. And we also see that because he's the one who feeds all the wild animals. He feeds the world. And so he seals this covenant, and he seals it with his bow, which is the rainbow. And he says that it'll come when the clouds come. So every time there's a rain, it's the possibility of having a rainbow. And even though we enjoy rainbows and we enjoy their color, we enjoy their beauty, they're not really primarily for us, because it says when he looks on it, that he'll remember that covenant. And if you lived in Hawaii, that's a daily occurrence. You see rainbows all day long, every day. And the world, they may not recognize what rainbows are really about. But when I see a rainbow, I get a joy in my heart. And it's not because of the beauty and all that, but I realize as I'm looking at that rainbow, that God is looking at that rainbow. And he's saying, I remember. He remembers. What it tells me is that in this life, we have many storms, and some of them are really big. These are like storms in our own lives. And a lot of times we'll think, hey, this storm, this one's going to kill me. This is a big storm. But rainbows, they come with storms. And it reminds me that he didn't come to destroy us, and that he's always watching us, and that he will see us through these storms. Okay, so here we are again. We're in the book of Genesis, which is the book of beginnings. And now we're having this new beginning. God, he has just saved man by destroying the wickedness in the world. And now Noah, he becomes a farmer and he plants these grapevines. So we can figure it's been at least 2 years from the flood because it takes 2 years for grapevines to be able to produce any fruit. And you would think that in this new world and with this new covenant of God with man, that things would be a little better. But then we have our very first story, and we see that God doesn't condemn grapes, and he also doesn't condemn drinking wine. But what he does have a problem with, he has a problem with drunkenness. And that's the problem in the story. We see drunkenness and nakedness. And if you ever notice, drunkenness and nakedness, they go together often. In our society, you get drunk, what happens next? But here, in this story, Noah, he's alone. But the thing is that people, they'll do things when they're drunk that they won't do when they're not drunk. And you could put when they're high, or you could put when they're loaded. And when we're looking at Noah, we're looking at what he did, we're not talking about a wicked man. We're talking about a man who God calls righteous. We're talking about a man who saved his whole family. And when Noah did this, it wasn't a public act. It wasn't private. It was in the privacy of his own tent. But that tells us that even these things we do in secret, our secret sins done in private, they still have the ability to destroy our families, and they have the ability to destroy all the people around us. And that's because there's always a price to pay with sin. But that price is not your salvation, and that price is also not God's love. But sin, it'll always bring about consequences. And the price could become death, because we know that, sin leads to death. But in the end, with sin, nobody ever gets away with anything. And we don't know exactly what happened in the story, but we do know that Ham went into his father's tent, and he went in there uninvited. And Ham, when he did go in there, he saw his father, and he saw him in a state that he should have never seen his father in. He saw his father naked. But instead of leaving quietly or leaving quickly, he didn't even cover his father's indiscretions. But what he did do is he took the opportunity and he delighted himself in it. And it doesn't mean that he lusted, but, in a way it looks to me like he may have been trying to take the old man down a couple pegs. And by the language there, it's not exactly clear what Ham did, though it said that Noah knew what he did. But, maybe Ham's thinking, hey, he's not any different than the rest of us. He's not so righteous. And it's maybe kind of like I caught ya. I gotcha.
You've been listening to Face to Face. Face to Face on this radio station has been provided by Your Neighborhood Church. If you want to help support Face to Face and put this program on other stations just like yours, you can contact us at yourneighborhoodchurch.com or write Your Neighborhood Church, P.O. Box 500, Romeo, Michigan 48065.
There's a place he comes to me. Though I'm blind, he helps me see. Though I see dimly in this place, one day I'll see him face to face.
Tune in again tomorrow at this same time as we continue to go through the Bible.